They searched by ground. They searched by air. They searched within themselves. I'm gonna let it shine.
Clint Bobo was the last person to see his sister Holly alive as she was led into the woods by a man. Tell you they thought your story was strange.
It was just question after question after question. Now, of course, they did check me. They said for scratches. And so I took my shirt off.
Harry Brett.
He is a horrible, horrible human being. He spent the majority of his life in prison for kidnapping and rape. And he absolutely perfectly matches the description that Clint Bobo provided.
I would kind of help coach her a little bit on that.
There will be peace in the valley for me.
A beat-up pickup truck would have had to fly at 2,000 kilometers per hour just to match the witness's testimony. A frantic mother screaming into the phone, "Shoot him!" while a bewildered brother watched helplessly as a stranger led his sister deep into the woods. Welcome to the chilling case of Holly Bobo! A bizarre saga where 3 men are serving life sentences, only for the star witness to casually smile and confess more than a decade later. I lied on the stand. If they are innocent, where is the real monster hiding? Let's uncover the truth. Imagine a locked cage suddenly being thrown wide open. For over a decade, the state of Tennessee believed they had successfully closed the darkest and most expensive murder investigation in their history. 3 men were locked away, serving life sentences for the brutal abduction and murder of a young woman. The community finally felt a grim sense of closure. But in early 2024, a shocking twist shattered that fragile peace. Jason Autry, the state's star witness, the very informant whose chilling testimony put his 3 co-defendants behind bars, casually dropped a bombshell that shook the justice system to its core. He confessed that his entire testimony on the stand was a complete fabrication. He had lied under oath to save his own skin.
Sir, I'm falsely accused and innocent.
Okay, the court's going to enter a plea of not guilty on your behalf.
This jaw-dropping recantation changes absolutely everything. If Autry's gruesome tale of a murder under a river bridge was nothing but a scripted lie, then the men currently rotting in prison might actually be innocent scapegoats. And far more terrifyingly, the real monster who walked out of the woods that morning might still be walking among us today. To understand how a case could become this catastrophically derailed, we have to rewind the clock to the very beginning. Let's travel back to the misty, ordinary morning of Wednesday, April 13, 2011. Holly Bobo was a 20-year-old nursing student with a bright smile, a beautiful singing voice, and a promising future.
Pretty much a mother's girl. We shared a bond that she would sometimes look at me and say, "That's scary," because we could finish each other's sentences.
She lived with her parents and her older brother in a quiet, rural home in Darden, Tennessee. That morning, Holly woke up early, around 4:30 a.m., diligently studying for an upcoming nursing exam. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Her mother packed her lunch, kissed her goodbye, and left for work.
Kitchen table, studying. And I kissed her goodbye and told her I loved her, just like every other morning.
But shortly before 8 a.m., a fatal misunderstanding occurred, one that would haunt a brother for the rest of his life. Clint Bobo, Holly's 25-year-old brother, was still asleep in his bedroom when he was jolted awake by the frantic barking of the family dogs. Groggy and confused, he pulled back the window blinds and peered outside.
So I decided to get up, to see what he was barking at. Listened just briefly, and I could tell it was a male and a female voice. I never was able to really tell what they were saying.
You couldn't tell if they were shouting, if they were arguing.
Well, as I listened a little bit closer, I could tell that was Holly's voice. So I knew it was Holly. So in my mind, the male's voice I knew to be Drew.
Through the early morning shadows, he saw 2 silhouettes in the carport. It was Holly, kneeling on the concrete, face to face with a large man dressed head to toe in mossy oak camouflage. Because Holly's boyfriend, Drew, was an avid hunter who often wore camo, Clint's sleepy brain made a tragic assumption. He thought the couple was simply having a heated, emotional argument. Unsure of what to do, he picked up his cell phone and dialed his mother's number.
A man in camouflage who I identified as Drew were knelt down in the garage facing each other.
Asked me, was Holly not going to school today? Was she going home with Drew? And I said, that's not true. I instantly knew something was wrong.
I could see him.
I said, that's not true. Get a gun and shoot him. And Clint said, you want me to shoot Drew? And I think that's when I hung up and called 911.
It was a devastating, paralyzing moment of hesitation. Clint thought his mother was either overreacting or making some kind of hysterical joke. He simply couldn't comprehend that a violent predator had actually breached their safe haven. By the time Clint finally grasped the horrific reality of the situation, grabbed a loaded pistol, and rushed out the front door, the driveway was empty.
Somebody has my daughter. Please get there now.
All that was left behind was a chilling puddle of blood on the concrete. The camouflage-clad stranger had already led Holly away, disappearing into the dense, silent woods. Because of just a few minutes of tragic hesitation, Clint had lost his beloved little sister forever.
Soon, half the county, people, police, and search dogs overrun the Bobo property.
Get ready to go out into the woods, okay?
We had neighbors, friends, family, all of Decatur County just kind of poured into this family's front yard, and they're out in the woods looking for her.
In the dark and desperate realm of missing persons investigations, there is a universal, unspoken rule: the first 72 hours are everything. This narrow window is the golden time frame, where physical evidence is fresh, memories are sharp, and the chances of finding the victim alive are at their absolute highest. But in the tragic abduction of Holly Bobo, these precious 72 golden hours were not just lost. They were systematically squandered by a cascading series of catastrophic failures and baffling incompetence by local law enforcement. The chaos began the moment the horrific reality of the morning set in. Despite a frantic 911 call from a terrified mother and a direct eyewitness account of an armed man leading a young woman into the dense Tennessee wilderness, the initial police response was painfully, agonizingly slow.
Holly, I love you so much. Please try to get home to us.
Instead of launching an immediate, aggressive pursuit into the tree line, authorities hesitated in a state of sheer confusion. It took an inexcusable 2 hours for law enforcement to finally mobilize tracking dogs and a helicopter to search the woods. In a violent kidnapping scenario, a 2-hour head start is a lifetime. It provided the abductor with the critical time needed to vanish into the vast rural landscape, leaving a cold, dead trail in his wake. But the delayed pursuit was only the first domino to fall. Back at the Bobo residence, the most crucial staging ground of the crime was being actively destroyed. In the carport, a chilling puddle of Holly's blood marked the exact spot where a violent, desperate struggle had taken place. Yet, incredibly, responding officers failed to immediately tape off the area or establish a secure crime scene perimeter. Because of this monumental oversight, the area devolved into a chaotic free-for-all. Hundreds of well-meaning neighbors, search volunteers, and untrained officers freely milled around the property, their boots literally trampling through the garage and destroying whatever fragile, microscopic forensic evidence the perpetrator might have left behind. As days turned into agonizing months, the official investigation hit a brick wall of its own making. Desperate for answers, Holly's family eventually turned to a team of independent, nonprofit private investigators. Applying basic, rigorous investigative logic, these seasoned professionals quickly zeroed in on a local group of suspects dubbed the A-Gang, the very men who would be convicted years later. The PIs mapped out cell phone pings, exposed fabricated cross-syllabus, and essentially handed law enforcement the keys to the case on a silver platter. How did the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, respond to this massive breakthrough? With pure hostility. Desperate to hide the fact that they had wasted years chasing the wrong suspect due to their own stubborn tunnel vision, the TBI viewed the private investigators as a threat to their reputation rather than as allies. Authorities aggressively bullied the independent sleuths, issuing subpoenas, interrogating them at their homes, and actively intimidating them into silence. Rather than admit their incompetence and pivot toward the truth, law enforcement chose pride over justice.
I knew that he was wearing camouflage and he had what appeared to be a black object in his hand.
You also described his height and weight and hair color.
I estimated him to be about 5'10" and about 200 pounds.
What color hair?
I really don't remember focusing on his hair.
As days dragged into agonizing weeks, law enforcement found themselves drowning in mounting public outrage and sheer desperation. They desperately needed a suspect. It was then that a local man appeared on their radar, a figure who seemed to walk straight out of a psychological thriller. Terry Britt. Britt was not just a random neighbor from Decatur County. He was a registered predator with a dark, documented history of kidnapping and violent crimes of a sensitive nature. Even more terrifying, investigators quickly learned that Britt harbored a deeply unsettling obsession with young, beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed women.
Britt was a registered sex offender who lived fairly close to the Bobo home. He lived also very, very close to where some of her property was found. According to Terry Dicus, Terry Britt did have, for lack of a better term, a type. He liked pretty blonde, blue-eyed girls, and Holly fit that type.
Holly Bobo fit his predatory profile with terrifying perfection. When detectives looked closer at this suspect, the similarities shifted from merely suspicious to undeniably alarming. Clint Bobo's description of the abductor had been incredibly specific: a large, imposing man, dressed head to toe in mossy oak camouflage, speaking with a distinctively deep, low voice. Terry Britt was a heavily built man. He owned and frequently wore hunting camouflage. And when Clint later listened to an audio sample of Britt's voice, the eerie resemblance to the man standing in the garage that morning was undeniable. Furthermore, cadaver dogs brought to Britt's property had positive hits on 2 of his vehicles and several tools. To the lead TBI investigator, Terry Dicus, Britt wasn't just a person of interest, he was the smoking gun.
The cadaver dogs alerted to 2 of Britt's vehicles and several tools around his house. Somebody has been decomposing in or around these vehicles and around these tools.
Determined to nail him, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation quietly secured warrants to wiretap Britt's phone and plant hidden listening devices inside his residence. For weeks, they monitored his every word, waiting in the shadows for a slip-up. Finally, their recording equipment captured a solitary monologue so morbid and disturbing that it made the seasoned detective's blood run cold.
Too, but okay, like you said before, she's young, pretty, perfect, somewhat body.
Yeah.
Okay, like a toy, some people would think. See, this man, when he goes and gets this female, he's okay, if he's doing it for himself now if he's doing it for somebody else for money, from get her to point A to point B, like I was talking to you before, it's different. But if he's doing it for himself, for his own benefit, then he's gonna go snatch her up. He can't wait to get her to wherever he's gonna take her to, because he's wanting that body.
Right.
All right. He's gonna make mistakes along the way. I mean, he's got to make some mistakes.
Sure.
Okay, and he's got her. He can do whatever he wants to do to her, with her, whatever. But when he gets done, that's when reality sets in. See, right now it's just fantasy world.
Right.
But here comes reality. Now I've got a body. What am I going to do with it? Because if you keep it, you got to feed it.
Right.
You got to hide it. It ain't gonna happen. And if you kill it.
To investigator Dicus, this was not just the rambling of an old man. This was a predator subconsciously reliving his own horrific crime, shifting chillingly from speaking about the victim as a shit to a disposable. It felt exactly like a confession wrapped in a hypothetical scenario.
See, I took it as he's reliving the story, and when he gets to the point where she's no longer alive, he changes from talking about her as a person to talking about her as a myth.
However, the criminal justice system requires more than just creepy audio tapes and a shadowy past. It requires hard, irrefutable science. Despite the reactions of the cadaver dogs, the chilling wiretaps, and the flawless physical match, forensic teams tore through Britt's property and found absolutely nothing. There was not a single strand of Holly's blonde hair, not a microscopic drop of blood. Zero DNA connected Terry Britt to the abduction. This total lack of physical evidence created a massive, bitter fracture within the TBI. Superiors accused investigator Dicus of suffering from severe, tunnel vision, becoming so blindingly obsessed with Terry Britt that he was ignoring all other potential leads. Dicus was ultimately pulled off the case. Helpless and empty-handed without DNA, the police were forced to let their perfect decoy walk free.
Were you asked to leave the investigation?
I was taken off the investigation, yes.
Because you felt passionately that they had a suspect that you should be pursuing, and nobody else agreed?
Well, not nobody else agreed, but the right people didn't agree is more accurate.
By pouring all their resources into this single suspect, authorities squandered years of critical time, allowing the real killers, whoever they were, to slip further into the shadows. For over 3 agonizing years, the predators who abducted Holly Bobo likely slept soundly, fully convinced they had pulled off the perfect crime. They relied on one of the oldest, darkest rules in the criminal underworld: no body, no case. As long as Holly remained swallowed by the vast, unforgiving Tennessee wilderness, the killers were untouchable. But in September 2014, a twist of pure, unpredictable fate brought their twisted house of cards crashing down. Enter Larry Stone, a local man navigating the dense, remote woods of Decatur County to hunt for wild ginseng. Nearly 20 miles away from the Bobo family home, in a desolate, heavily wooded ravine rarely touched by human footsteps, Larry noticed something strangely out of place: a large, overturned bucket. Driven by curiosity, he approached and lifted it. What he found underneath was a heart-stopping, gruesome nightmare: scattered human remains, including a skull pierced by a distinct, fatal bullet hole to the back of the head. Dental records would quickly confirm the devastating truth. Holly Bobo had finally been found.
They're looking at remains that you know belongs to somebody that was loved, and you're sitting there looking at the ground when you're seeing your daughter laying there in her place.
This accidental, chilling discovery was the monumental turning point the stalled investigation desperately needed. It single-handedly shattered the no body, no crime defense strategy, providing undeniable, physical proof that a brutal execution had taken place. You would naturally assume that Larry Stone, the man who provided the ultimate key to breaking this cold case wide open, would be hailed as a local hero. But in a baffling, infuriating twist, the authorities treated him like a nuisance. Instead of profound gratitude, Stone was met with aggressive hostility and intimidation. When he reported the location of the remains, a responding officer coldly glared at him and demanded to know why he was out there, snapping defensively that nobody was supposed to be looking for Holly Bobo. A stunned and offended Larry simply replied that if it were their child lying out there in the dirt, they would be searching too. It was a bizarre, deeply unsettling reaction from law enforcement, essentially punishing a good Samaritan for inadvertently doing the job they had failed to accomplish for over 3 years. Stepping up to find justice for a murdered girl, only to be ruthlessly harassed and interrogated by the very police who should be thanking you. Isn't that absolutely ridiculous? If you are shivering at the thought of these dark, potentially corrupt corners of the justice system, drop a likey right now and hit that subscribe button to give me the strength to expose even more twisted cases. I want to hear from you guys. Do you think the police were intentionally trying to cover something up? Or were they simply just that incompetent and embarrassed? Comment your theories down below!
Investigators follow every lead. Disheartening evidence of Holly begins turning up. Homework, a notebook, that lunch her mother made, and Holly's phone, all found scattered along backcountry roads in the weeks after the abduction.
With Holly's remains finally recovered, the clock was ticking louder than ever. The public and the media were screaming for a conviction, and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation was suffocating under the weight of its own past failures. Desperate to close the case and save face, authorities shifted their crosshairs away from hard forensics and toward the easiest, most vulnerable targets they could find. Enter the Adams brothers, Zach and Dylan. Known around Decatur County as local drifters and methamphetamine addicts with lengthy rap sheets, they were the perfect, unsympathetic scapegoats for a police department cornered by its own incompetence. But to build a murder case out of thin air, the police desperately needed a confession. their strategy to get one crossed the line from aggressive interrogation to downright psychological warfare. Investigators zeroed in on Zach's brother, Dylan Adams, a young man with documented intellectual disabilities and a severely impaired concept of time. In a truly bizarre and highly unethical legal maneuver, police arrested Dylan on unrelated weapons charges, only to release him on one highly specific, deeply disturbing condition: he was mandated to live in the home of a retired police officer he had never even met. Isolated from his family and trapped in a hostile environment, completely controlled by law enforcement, the mentally vulnerable Dylan was relentlessly manipulated, pressured, and intimidated. After 5 grueling weeks of psychological conditioning, the retired cop dialed 911, claiming Dylan was finally ready to confess. Dylan ultimately broke, offering a wildly inconsistent, heavily coerced statement claiming he had seen Holly at his brother's house. His story constantly morphed, sometimes claiming Zach killed her, other times pointing the finger at someone else entirely. None of his details matched the actual evidence, but for the police, it was just enough to slap handcuffs on Zach Adams.
Adams, a known drug user and dealer in Decatur County, claims that Shane Austin, his brother Dylan, and himself were together trying to purchase drugs the day Bobo went missing. They stopped at a gas station and Adams saw cop cars speeding towards Parsons.
I pump $5 in gas, and while I'm pumping, I see 4 or 5 SUVs. And I'm not for sure if they had their blue lights on. I know there was no sirens, but I could tell there was cop cars. My antennas kind of went up because we're going to pick up drugs, and they're cops.
He claims he did not know Bobo personally and that the only connection he had to the Bobo family was that Bobo's mother was his 4th grade teacher.
The dirty tactics didn't stop there. To bolster their incredibly fragile, circumstantial case, investigators began treating malicious neighborhood gossip as verified fact. A vicious rumor began circulating around the county about a dark, horrific, torture video that allegedly showed Zach Adams assaulting a bound Holly Bobo. Acting purely on hearsay from an unreliable informant, police swooped in and arrested 2 other local men, Jeff and Mark Piercy, accusing them of filming and hiding the footage. The authorities were convinced this phantom tape would be the silver bullet to close the case once and for all. There was only one massive problem. The video simply did not exist. It was a complete fabrication born from small-town hysteria. Law enforcement tore through properties, digital files, and phones, finding absolutely nothing. The charges against the Piercy brothers were quietly dropped, but the damage was done. The fabricated narrative of a sadistic gang of local junkies had already been successfully planted in the minds of the public and the future jury. The police finally had their monsters, whether the facts supported it or not. When Zach Adams finally faced a jury in September 2017, the prosecution was painfully aware of their own glaring weaknesses. They had 0 DNA, no murder weapon, and absolutely no physical evidence linking Zach to Holly Bobo's tragic death. To secure a life sentence, they desperately needed a star witness. They found their golden ticket in Jason Autry, Zach's former friend and co-defendant. Facing the terrifying reality of life behind bars, Autry made the ultimate selfish choice. He cut a plea deal with the state, agreeing to sell out his friend in exchange for his own eventual freedom. Taking the witness stand, Autry delivered a cinematic, blood-chilling script perfectly designed to manipulate the emotions of the jury. According to his graphic testimony, he arrived at a local property to purchase illicit substances, only to find Zach with Holly's body wrapped in a blanket in the back of a pickup truck. Autry claimed he agreed to help dispose of her. They drove to a desolate bridge near the Tennessee River, planning to throw her in. But as they unloaded her, Autry swore he saw her foot move and heard a muffled sound of distress. Realizing the young woman was still alive, Zach allegedly grabbed a revolver and executed her with a single, point-blank shot to the back of the head. It was a gruesome, emotionally devastating story that left the courtroom in stunned silence. But when you look past the theatrical horror, there was one massive, undeniable problem. Hard science completely obliterated Autry's narrative. When defense experts meticulously analyzed the digital footprints of the case, the cell phone tower pings from both Zach and Holly, the timeline completely unraveled. During the exact window of the abduction and the alleged murder, Zach's phone was pinging towers miles away from Holly's location. The 2 phones did not converge until much later in the morning, a time when forensic experts agree Holly was already deceased. To make Jason Autry's sworn timeline fit the geographical cell phone data, you would have to completely abandon the laws of basic physics. In order for Zach and Jason to commit the crime exactly as Autry described, Zach's vehicle, a rusty, beat-up 1998 Nissan Frontier, would have had to travel between cell sectors at a mind-boggling speed of 200 miles per hour, or roughly 2,000 kilometers per hour. Let that sink in. To make the prosecution's star witness tell the truth, a 1998 Nissan pickup truck would have needed to break the sound barrier, flying faster than a military fighter jet. The only way that old truck reaches 2,000 kilometers per hour is if you drop it out of an airplane. Yet, in a terrifying display of a broken justice system, the court essentially ignored this glaring scientific impossibility. The prosecution bulldozed over the undeniable math, and the jury, blinded by the gruesome, scripted details and desperate for closure, chose a convenient, impossible lie over the hard mathematical truth.
The Bobos are allowed to return home.
I remember the first thing I wanted to do was go to her room and open her closet and smell her.
More than a decade has passed since that fateful, foggy morning in the Darden Woods. The Holly Bobo case seemed buried under the dust of time and the weight of life sentences. However, a shocking twist in early 2024 shook the entire Tennessee justice system to its core. Jason Autry, the star witness who traded his gruesome testimony for leniency, finally admitted with a smirk everything he said on the stand years ago was nothing but a scripted lie. This confession of perjury acts as a sledgehammer, smashing the already hollow foundation of the conviction. Remember, the police never had a single drop of DNA, no murder weapon, and no physical evidence linking Zach Adams' group to the crime scene. Now, with the only core testimony retracted, the entire case officially collapses. The verdict the jury once believed in turns out to have been built on nothing but coercion and fabrication. If Jason Autry's testimony was fake, and if that beat-up pickup truck couldn't fly at 2,000 kilometers per hour to pull off the crime, then a terrifying, bone-chilling question remains. Who is the real monster who took Holly Bobo's life?
Donna, I want to say one thing. I'm innocent of these charges.
I heard you say that earlier. Okay.
Right hand before God, I'm innocent, sir.
All right. Thank you very much.
Criminologists and independent analysts have proposed a final theory, a scenario far more logical and horrifying than the story cooked up by the police. The true killer wasn't a loud, clumsy gang of addicts. The real devil was a lone predator, a cunning wolf. This individual knew the complex forested terrain of Decatur County intimately. He had patiently stalked Holly for a long time, learning her every habit and the family's daily routine. He knew exactly when her parents left for work, when her brother would still be fast asleep, and the exact moment that young girl would walk out to the garage alone. Every logical arrow points back to the original prime suspect, Terry Britt, a convicted kidnapper and rapist with a morbid obsession with blonde, blue-eyed women. Britt's physical stature and deep, gravelly voice matched Clint Bobo's description 100%. The secret wiretap of him mumbling about how to hide a body still exists, echoing like a barbaric confession from the shadows. But because of the police's utter failure to protect the crime scene, the chance to collect DNA in those first 72 hours was lost, leaving authorities to watch helplessly as he slipped through the net of justice. To cover up their own incompetence and silence public outrage, the justice system ruthlessly offered up Zach Adams' group as a sacrifice. Social outcasts and addicts with existing records like Zach, or the intellectually impaired Dylan Adams, became the perfect scapegoats. They were cast into the darkness of a prison cell not because of the truth, but because the system desperately needed an ending to close the file. The case is closed on paper, perhaps leaving innocent men to rot in prison, while the real killer might still be out there, smiling in freedom. Which theory do you believe? Was Zach Adams' group truly evil, or were they just victims of a cold-blooded, desperate justice system? Leave your comments and join the debate with our community! Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the updates when this case is eventually brought back to court. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one!